Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Spirituality. I'll get my music going here. A little Freddie Herbert, Red Clay. And we're going to go ahead and get the sharing going. Which, it's an interesting thing about this is that for some reason in the app, I'm not really able to share to pages anymore. So that's a little bit of a hindrance, but we're going to go ahead and run with what we have. So y'all bear with me as I do my sharing. Let me know if y'all can hear me okay. To my family down in Birmingham, Alabama, and my cousin and my dear friend James Ford has passed away, and I'm really feeling some kind of way about this because if you knew James, you would know what a gift to humanity this man really was. I'm just I was debating whether or not I wanted to actually even do a broadcast this morning because I'm grieving, but at the same time, this was a man who really had a keen awareness of who he was. He was a Vietnam veteran. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a grandfather. He was a business owner. He's an entrepreneur. And one of the biggest encouragements in my life, he was instrumental in my decision to join the military. He was encouraging when I went back to college. And even though he didn't make it when my wife had passed away, he was there for me in spirit. So everything that I could ask of a friend, everything that I could ask of a cousin, everything that I could ask of a human being was wrapped up in James. I'm blessed to have had him in my life, and the thing is that I'm glad that I understand now that energy doesn't cease. That energy simply transforms and it returns to source. So, with that being said, rest in power, James. You worked hard, now rest hard. And I love you and love my family, Peggy, Portia, James, Jarvis. Y'all are in my prayers, in my heart. And so, anyway, this is a production of the Global Online Ministry Alliance, which consists of Lynn Bennett Jr., Catherine Toon, Kyle Butler, Mike Zinker, Mike Porter, Keith Giles, and yours truly. And then I'm also part of the 3-Chord Live, which consists of Bill Thrasher, Michelle Brown, Tammy Wilson, Mike Zinker, Keith Butler, and yours truly. And a couple of shout outs to my man Henry Harris, the Brother Henry and You Show, and to my friend and brother Tony Calloway with Life and Favor. So that pretty much does all of my shout outs. I'm going to go ahead and bring my music down here. By which I'm able to do this, and basically so I don't have to fumble around with so many different things. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is to provide a quality production that is visually stimulating as well as encouraging, informative, and edifying. Because at the end of the day, if something isn't edifying you, you probably shouldn't waste your time with it. That's just my 2 cents. I've reached a point in my life where there's not a whole lot as far as, I mean, there's some really awesome teachers out here, and those I really listen to. But the old preaching paradigm, I just I can't anymore. So that being said, so my man Kurt, he asked me, did I get the coffee cleaned up? He sent a meme that was just hilarious this morning, and I shared it. I copied it and I shared it. It was absolutely hilarious, and I actually spit coffee all over the place because it was so damn funny. But anyway, it's quantum spirituality, where we look at spirituality through the lens of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, the quantum field, so on and so forth. And so last week I talked about how data gets processed all the way out to wisdom. But today I want to talk about the information part of this. Because when you take in data, you have to kind of filter it in order to process it. It's how you glean what is valuable from what it is that you're taking in, what you're ingesting. And so I wish that I was able to do this, and I actually came up with this matrix, and at some point I'll share it. I'm thinking that I may not actually share it until I actually write a book around it, because it's so profound, and the matrix is actually so profound that I think I may even try to patent it. But it basically goes like this. We all know what a Franklin ledger is, or a T ledger. You have the line, and you have the horizontal line, the vertical line. It looks like the cross, right? And on one side you have what is good and what is bad, right? Or whatever it is that the decision criteria is. And in this particular case, I want to start off, if you have a pencil and a piece of paper, I want you to draw a vertical line. And then I want you to draw a horizontal line. And you'll have what looks like a plus sign, or a Constantine cross, if you will. And you'll see this in a minute. And in the left column, I want you to, at the top of the left column, write the word false. False. F-A-L-S-E. And on the right column, write the word true. You with me so far? So we have a plus sign, Constantine cross, or a quadrant for you math majors out there. So you, in the left column, vertically, you have false. In the right, you have true. And in the upper part of the quadrant, I want you to write the word ubiquitous. Ubiquitous. Don't ask me how to spell it. Normally I'm a spelling bee champion, but I don't really feel like going through that. So if you, just write ubiquitous as best as you can. And if you can't find it, look it up, Google it, right? And then in the lower quadrant, or in the lower half of the quadrant, right in the left column, write obscure. Obscure. And so now what you have are four quadrants, or four segments of, four quadrants that that are true, false, ubiquitous, and obscure. Now, why is all of this important? Because it is clear that some of you really don't know how to process information. And what happens is that you don't really have what I call a robust bullshit filter. And this is something that I've gone through with my sons. This is a tried and true method. And it's something that helped me as I was an adult, because one of the things that I wanted to be able to do is to adequately explain what my thought process looks like. And I'm not saying that everybody has to mimic my thought process. As I want to say, your mileage may vary. In other words, It works for me, may not work for you, and that's all good. However, this is the thing, this is my thought process. When I ingest a bit of information, I've taken this data and I've aggregated it, collated it, sorted it, whatever, and now it's information. Okay, I've pieced it together so that there is a story that's being told. Now, the first thing that I want to know is whether or not the story is true or whether it's false. And this is really difficult because first of all, truth is not absolute. It isn't. Because for example, murder is wrong. To take a human life is wrong. However, if someone is attacking your family, one of your children or your spouse, and you react in such a way that it causes the life of that individual that's doing the attacking to be lost, it's still not right because it's still taking human life, but there is a justification to it. Now, taking a life because of ideology or because of convenience or because it is expedient in the process of committing some crime, no, it's wrong. So yes, there is and you have to understand. I'm going to talk some mathematics here. It's like the principle of asymptotes. And again, look it up. I'm not going to spell it. But as something approaches zero, as the line comes down and approaches zero, it never actually equals zero. And that's called an asymptotic value. In other words, as the line goes out to infinity, it gets closer and closer to zero, but it never actually achieves zero. It's like the race to zero with no finish line. So things are asymptotically close to an absolute, but they never actually achieve it because there's always something that splits that difference. Okay, so this is really really important. So we're looking at true and false, and what is true or false. First of all, there are certain things, like I said, like murder. Murder comes about as close to an absolute truth as you'll get. But there are other ones that have, varying shades of gray. And so you have to find out what is actually true for you. Now, I'm going to deal with something specifically because we have this America's Frontline Doctors thing this week. And they were touting the benefits of hydroxyquinine. And they were also bemoaning things like mask usage and so on and so forth. In other words, they were speaking science framed by an ideological perspective. So when you take science and frame it by ideology, or you take a fact or a bit of information and you frame it by religion, that chances are this is not going to be true. Even if there's some truth to it, it's not going to be true because it is tainted with an agenda. Now, yes, there are left-wing framings or left-leaning ideological framings that are equally as false. And I don't have one specifically to cite at this point, but I'm talking about this because this is something that has happened recently, and it has exposed the inability of people to adequately filter information. Now, and again, everything isn't absolute, but here's the thing. In the case of this drug, hydroxyquinine, that this drug has had efficacy demonstrated with particular ailments. For example, it is known to be an effective anti-malarial drug. That much we know. And we know that it has efficacy with regard to certain other types of coronaviruses. However, COVID-19 is called a novel coronavirus in the fact that it doesn't naturally occur in the human population. So when it shows, like for example, the common cold is a coronavirus. SARS, MRSA, these are coronaviruses. And they all have some, basically this hydroxyquinine has shown some effectiveness in those cases. But in this COVID-19, this particular one, it has shown to be potentially harmful. Now, this isn't anybody trying to tout any political agenda. You can go and look in the JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, or you can look at journals for epidemiology or virology, and you can look this. You can look this up. You can look at the research. Look at it for yourself. And here's the thing, that in order to accurately process information, it takes a certain amount of intellectual industriousness. You cannot be intellectually lazy and just think that you're going to come up with something. And the other thing too is that, we talk about herd immunity, and we know how herd immunity is not really a thing when it comes to this virus. Also, herd mentality is not a thing when it comes to this, because just because it is with the herd doesn't necessarily make it right, and because it's against the herd doesn't necessarily make it right. You have to go back and not just find out what tribe you're in informationally. You have to actually do the work. See, this is the problem, is that we have become accustomed to being spoon-fed. And let me tell you this is why this ties into quantum spirituality, because we are quantum beings. We are made up of the very stuff that the universe is made of. We are made, listen, there is scientific evidence that says that the human makeup, and I'm talking about the physical human being, is made up of the same stuff as the sun, as stars. You are a star. This is why Jesus was when he was saying, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world, you are salt. That means that you are something life-giving, that you are something that adds flavor, that adds seasoning, that is a preservative, that is all of these things. Jesus was given a science lesson, not a theology lesson, y'all. And you are light. You are made of the same stuff as stars. So we're quantum beings. That means that we have the entire universe of information at our disposal. But it is incumbent upon us to go out and get it. Okay? See, this is the thing. We have to go out and get it. You cannot depend on someone to spoon feed you information. Because if you do, you're not behaving like a quantum being. What you're doing is you are rejecting all of the quantum wisdom that is available to you in favor of what someone else has consumed and is regurgitating. In other words, basically you are being fed like a baby bird. In other words, somebody is eating up some information and they're vomiting it out to you, and you're sucking it up. And that's a hard one, but that's really what's happening. So we have true and false. What is true? What is true is what can be proven empirically, that can be examined by multiple people, and that the same result comes. That it can withstand scrutiny, that it withstands experiments, that things that prove it as a thesis or a hypothesis or even a theory, that it's provable, it's repeatable. That's what makes something true. Not simply that, well, everybody says it, therefore it must be true. No, that's not the case at all. And in order to find out whether or not it meets all of these criteria, you have to do some work. You have to do some research yourself. You have to dig in. You have to do some mining. You have to be like a miner 49er when it comes to information, mining for these nuggets of informational gold. Now, if it's false, that means for example, as I've been saying a lot lately, my grandfather once said that a broken clock is right twice a day, but it just because it's right twice a day doesn't mean that it is qualified to teach you anything. A broken clock will not teach you how to tell time. It'll tell you how to observe something, but it doesn't teach you how to. And so when we look at something that happens once or twice, the one-offs, the outliers, okay, if it can't be repeated, if it doesn't have some universal acceptance, if it isn't time tested, if it can't withstand the scrutiny of experimentation, then it's likely false. Okay, and again, there are some things that, listen, something may be false to the majority of people, but it might just work for you. And in that case, if it works for you and it doesn't hurt anybody else, well, then it may be asymptotically closer to truth for you, not for everyone. But in the case of, again, talking about this America's Frontline Doctors thing, that none of the things that they said can withstand scientific scrutiny. And therefore, they have to be rejected. But let me go on, because I've talked about the vertical columns of our quadrant. Now I want to talk about the horizontal ones. Because the top one, the upper one, is ubiquity or ubiquitousness. That if something is ubiquitous, then that means it's everywhere. Like air is ubiquitous. Or if you're a fish, water is ubiquitous. And God, creation, source, the universe is everywhere. Therefore, God is ubiquitous. And because you are made of the same stuff as God, you are God, and everyone else around you is God. So God is ubiquitous. There is nowhere where God isn't. That's ubiquitous. So when you find a bit of information that it is easily accessible, in other words, it's like the equivalent of a Google search. You know how Google searches work. There's an algorithm that ranks what you've searched. And what scores the highest is what goes to the top of the Google search. See, this is the magic of Google, because see, before Google, you had search engines. You had Yahoo, and you had web crawler, Alta Vista. You had all of these different search engines. But what Google did is it elevated the game by adding this ranking, this algorithm, which, by the way, algorithm, y'all know, is an Arabic word. Just had to throw that out there. So this algorithm ranks your search, and based on the ranking of the information, it sorts and puts the highest ranked data information at the top of your search. Now, that means that when you see something at the top of the list, that means it's pretty close to ubiquitous. That means Google didn't really have to work hard to find it. It's everywhere. So Google says, hey, this is everywhere, to the top of the list it goes. That's the way it works. Now, the things that are most obscure, these are the ones that are like on page 99 of your search. Because, you can actually keep going. You can drill down deeper, and you can find more stuff about what it is that you're searching for, and it may or may not be pertinent. However, in the case of it may be pertinent, that means that you might find something that is true, but it's obscure, which is the lower part of the quadrant. That means something that's obscure, that means that it's difficult to put your hand on it. It's difficult to find. And the other thing that you have to remember, we have to look at this through a quantum filter, which means that, based on like Schrodinger's experiment, that the state of this thing, the state of the information, has everything to do with how you're observing it at a particular point in time. That means it may be or it may not be. It may be the right thing, it may not be. And that will change based on the observation criteria. So if it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And usually things that are ubiquitous are either things that are accepted to be factual or true, or they could be part of what I call the Goebbels principle. Now, for those of you that don't know, Joseph Goebbels was Adolf Hitler's minister of propaganda in the Third Reich. And Goebbels came up with this theory. It was the big lie theory, that if you tell the biggest lie possible, tell it often, tell it vocally, that it will be accepted as truth. So that means you could tell a lie over and over again, that if you continue to tell this lie, that it becomes ubiquitous. And here's the scary thing. This is where we get off the rails in terms of how we process information, because a lot of people erroneously equate ubiquity with truth. That you think that because this is everywhere and it's widely known, that it must be true. See, I'll give you an example of that, and I'm going to tell you, I'm about to mess some people up, because if you do some searches on flat earth theory, you'll find a whole lot of information. And you'll find a lot of information that appears to have been scientifically proven, scientifically tested. However, it really isn't, because the people that have signed off on this scientifically are people that have an agenda to prove that bit of information, to basically sign off on it, to codify it, to make sure that their truth is accepted. And that's one of those things. So it's like, if you do a search on flat earth, you're going to come up with a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, you won't have to go to page 99 of the search. You'll find a lot of stuff. And all of it is basically bullshit. So that's what I mean. It's like, you'll find something that's ubiquitous. Like for example, what the Third Reich did is it blamed the problems of Germany and of Europe on the Jews. Said the Jews were the problem. And so they made this statement ubiquitous. They made it vocal, and they made it frequent. And so people began to accept it as the truth. This is like the myth of the welfare queen as a black woman. Because this is a lie that has been told over and over again, to the point where so many people accept it as truth. And see, here's the other thing too, is that when a lie becomes ubiquitous, it becomes ubiquitous largely because it strikes a nerve. And it helps to reinforce a narrative, albeit an improper narrative, but a narrative nonetheless. It is basically supplying confirmation bias. You can go look that up, what confirmation bias is. Basically, it's when you go out and you're looking for information, but you're only looking for information that supports your position. You're not concerned about what may be contrary to what you believe. You're only looking for what is that, basically supports your way of thinking. And let me tell you this. This is something that happened to me. And you have to take information, and I want you to kind of work with me here as I draw this mental picture. But let's say if you take a block, a box or a rectangle, right? And then you put an incomplete rectangle around that box, but just the lower part of the box, leaving the top exposed. But in between the inner box that you've drawn and the outer box that you've drawn, that there is a space. The space represents the area by which what you believe, the inner box represents what you believe, and so this space represents that which could come in and possibly displace or move away what you already believe. And this is something that most people don't do. What they do is they draw the box, and if they draw an outer box, if they do it at all, they give no room between it and basically, the outer box. There's no space. So that means nothing can get in that will upset that which you believe. And if you do that, basically you are the victim of what is known as inner thinking. In other words, you believe that what you believe is absolute and unchangeable, that it is immutable. And this is one of these things where religion kind of fucks everything up, because what religion will teach you is something that the Bible is infallible and immutable. In other words, it is the absolute final word on everything. And once you get to that, that means that no other information can creep in. So what I've done, this is giving you insight into my thought process, not telling you how you should think, but what I am saying is that you should give room to other ideas. Because if your idea is truly worthy, if it is truly something that is helpful, useful, that it really works for you, then that means that even if something that comes in contrary to it, it will not displace it. If you can basically prove your theorem against others. Okay? So what has happened to me over the years is that there have been concepts theologically like preterism, the whole teaching of everything concerning the law that is finished in 70 A.D. Okay, and I'm fully on board with that. I fully support the people who teach full preterism. Why? Because this actually makes sense. But when it was first presented to me, I saw it as heresy. And I rejected it, but then there was this space between the block of what I believed and what was coming in from the outside, and I allowed something to come in and basically be juxtaposed or laid side by side with, for comparative purposes, with what I believed. And when I saw it, that what I believed was inferior to what was coming in. And so it was simply logical that I allowed this to displace that. Or universal salvation, same thing. I used to rail against people who were inclusionists and universalists because I said that's heresy. You have to believe, you have to confess, you have to accept, you have to go through you have to pray the magic prayer. That was where I was, and so I taught that, and then I began to encounter people who were what I call hopeful inclusionists. They weren't quite fully inclusionists, but they were hopeful that God would, in his infinite love, that he would somehow include in his plan those who somehow missed the magic prayer. Then, I started talking and talking to and basically exchanging ideas with people who were universalists. And then I began to see, everybody's saved. If God is who he is or she is, and that that Jesus did what he did, then everybody must be saved. You can't exclude anyone. And that it didn't matter what your belief was, you were saved. But then I began to talk with some people that they said, hey, whoever said that people were unsaved in the first place? Whoever said that people needed to be rescued in the first place? Who said that? And then when I began to look at that, I said, okay, let me juxtapose that with what I already know. And I came to the conclusion that what I knew, what I held to be true, was inferior. So now I don't believe that anybody ever needed saving. I think that God made everything good, and God never changed his mind or her mind, and that Jesus wasn't on a rescue mission at all. That Jesus came to show us who we really were. Now, that's my process. So again, when something comes in and you look at it, whether it's ubiquitous or it's obscure, it's important that when something comes in and it's ubiquitous, at that point, right then and there, you need to go to, okay, is this true or is this false? Don't look at it as this confirms what I believe, because if you do that, you're going to be stuck. You'll never grow. You will be stuck. And what will happen is that people in your life are going to grow and move on and leave you behind. And you're going to be pissed off because you're going to think that everybody is falling into heresy because they stopped believing what you believe. You have to make sure that you filter this to say, okay, if what I'm taking in, this is ubiquitous as air, that I am filtering it to see whether or not it can withstand the scrutiny of truth. And I say this all the time, that if what you believe cannot withstand a simple Google search, then it is probably bullshit. It's not worth believing. But here's the magic part, is that things can be true and be incredibly obscure. It can be incredibly obscure. Do you know that when Niels Bohr introduced his concept of quantum entanglement, that Albert Einstein thought that Niels Bohr had lost his mind? But when we look at quantum mechanics today, we see that Bohr was right. We see that Schrodinger was right. We see that Planck is right. We see that there was more truth in these guys than there was in Einstein, but Einstein is a household name. His theories are ubiquitous. Now, I'm not saying, Einstein was right about most of what he said. And basically, when you are trying to explain the physical universe at a non-quantum level, then most of what he says is right. But when you get down to the quantum level, then you have to start examining Planck's theorems. You have to consider Schrodinger. You have to consider Heisenberg. You have to consider all of these others, because they were onto some stuff that Einstein hadn't seen. Matter of fact, quantum entanglement, Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. You understand that? In other words, Einstein took a physical concept, a quantum concept, and spiritualized it. Y'all, you got to be careful, because, see, this is what religion teaches you to do. It teaches you to spiritualize everything, even though there is a actual, fairly concrete explanation for it. I give you an example. I think this was Mark chapter 4, when Jesus came down from the Mount of Transfiguration, and he encounters a boy that's throwing himself into a fire. And so the accepted spiritual, scriptural perspective on this is that this boy had a demon. But if you look at the symptoms now, understanding that we know things better than they did then, we have a better understanding of things scientifically, medically, physically, psychologically, physiologically, all of these things we understand much better now, and we can say this kid was having an epileptic seizure. And that was the deal. So when Jesus came and quote unquote cast it out, He wasn't casting out a devil. He was basically just simply providing healing to the epilepsy. But again, for people that didn't understand medicine, all they understood was this demonology that they had been indoctrinated with. That was their frame of reference. But now we understand things better, and so we need to make sure that we leave enough room in our theology, in our anthropology, in our understanding of things, in the natural, the supernatural, the metaphysical as well as the physical, that we leave enough space that when something comes in that may be superior information, that we allow it to displace that which we already hold to be true. It's really, really important stuff because honestly, I mean, I'm looking at the United States of America right now, and I look at how much that comes through my timeline that is absolute and total complete bullshit. And what is really scary to me is how many people eat this up. In other words, they consume it as if it were absolutely true without applying any scrutiny to it. Now, understand, yes, the government has lied to us. Yes, the government has done really bad things like the Tuskegee experiment. Yes, they've done stuff like that. And so the government is not to be, you don't give the government carte blanche in terms of what they say. And then you just accept that because that's the other end of the pendulum. You don't want to swing that way either. But what you want to do is when information comes your way, that you look at it and you say, okay, is this ubiquitous or is this obscure? And if it's ubiquitous, how do I filter out that which is true from that which is not true? And the thing that you have to do is you have to look at this without any bias. And mind you, I'm going to be completely honest. Intellectual honesty says that nobody is going to look at it completely bereft of any bias. You are going to have some bias with any information that's presented to you. However, you have to strip away as much of your personal bias as you can to ensure that the information is filtered correctly. So now if we say that if it is ubiquitous and it is true, then it falls in the upper right-hand quadrant. And that means it's a winner. That means this is something that I can pretty much hang my hat on. I can look at this and say this is pretty consistent, that I can pretty much set my clock according to it. Now, the thing is that you have to remember is that even though, like, for example, someone in the 1800s discovered that the atom was the smallest part of the physical universe, but then others came after that discovery and discovered that there were smaller parts of the atom, that there were electrons, that there were neutrons, protons, and then we were under the impression that those components were the smallest part of the atom, and then somebody came up and said, "Okay, we found quarks." And what determines whether it's a proton or a neutron is whether it's an up quark or a down quark. Who knew, right? It's like somewhere new science came in that displaced the old, and if we don't allow that, then we don't move forward. That's why when I've said this, I'm on the record as saying this, is that medicine, chemistry, biology, anthropology, zoology, you name it, any ology that you could think of, any science, any field of study, everything has advanced. Everything has had a steady march forward except theology. Theology is the only one that basically, if you brought a theologian from the Dark Ages into the 21st century, that except for how we gather and use information, that theologian would absolutely be comfortable with today's theology. Why? Because it hasn't changed. This guy would be comfortable. But do you know that if you brought Sir Isaac Newton, and Isaac Newton was a really smart motherfucker, you bring him into the 21st century and his mind would be blown at how far we've come. He would be amazed, astounded. He would be blown away by what the advances that humanity has made. If you took Madame Curie and brought her into the 21st century, what we understand about radioactivity today completely dwarfs and eclipses everything that she knew. She would be blown away. If you took Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, the first person to do open heart surgery, and brought him into the 21st century and showed him modern heart surgery, he would be blown away. Do you see what I'm saying? The reason why these people would be blown away is because their predecessors, or not predecessors, actually, antecedents, is that the right word? That the people that followed him, that they allowed new information to come in, and that new information displaced what they knew and allowed the envelope to be pushed, the needle to be moved, and the science to be advanced. Listen, y'all, do not be an intellectual dinosaur. Don't be stuck. At some point, you have to move forward. And this is going to mean you're going to have to apply a different paradigm to how you ingest, consume, and regurgitate information. Because if you don't, you'll be stuck on the same thing over and over and over again. And society and every ology that you can think of will continue to march forward while you're stuck. You know, it's like back in the day, we used to have vinyl records. And one of the worst things that you could have happen with a vinyl record is for it to have a scratch in it. And it would just skip and skip and skip and skip. And that's where a lot of people are now. They're just skipping. See, the thing is now we have MP3s, and MP3s have error correction so that if there is a corruption in the file, there is some redundancy that's built in that allows even for the data to keep moving, even though a segment of it may be corrupt. And so you get a nice continuous listening experience in digital sound. You see how that works? So I hope that all of that is encouraging, that that's informational, that it's educational, because listen, we are quantum beings, and the whole wealth of the wisdom of the universe is at our disposal. Everything. But it is incumbent upon us as individuals to go out and mine it for ourselves. And then here's what happens, is that when you go out and begin mining for the truth, you will begin to find others who have done likewise. And those people will soon become your tribe because they're mining information just like you. And this is how a hypothesis goes to a theory and eventually become accepted as fact, because then it becomes ubiquitous, right? But the flip side of it is that if you get caught up in a lie that happens to be ubiquitous, it happens to be vociferous, it happens to be frequent, then you latch onto that and you get stuck with a bunch of people who are stuck. And then these people will constantly cry conspiracy foul against the people that are moving on. And you don't want to be that. You don't want to be that guy. You want to be the person who's part of a movement forward. So that's the whole thing. I'm a firm believer that we are created to move forward at the speed of love. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit me up at my website. It's www.derekday.com. Click the link, mark contact, and fill out the little form. It asks you for your name and your email. That's it. And then there's a block that you can fill in, and it will immediately shoot me an email. And if you think that I'm an awesome guy, you want to tell me that, that's great. And I will respond to that. And if you click on that link and you fill it out and you want to tell me how big of an asshole you think I am, great. I will respond to that too, because I want to make sure that I answer every question that comes my way. Now, also, please check out the 2 podcasts that I'm involved in. Number one, the Heretic Happy Hour with Keith Giles, Katie Valentine, and Matthew DiStefano. Please check it out. Please listen. Please subscribe. And make sure that you support this podcast on Patreon, because there's a lot of work that goes into this. And people are working hard to make a really excellent podcast experience for you. And, excuse me, make sure that you listen to the Love Forward podcast, which is my own podcast, which there will be a new one dropping tomorrow with Glenn Klein, who is the founder of the Sex in the Pews podcast. And I'm going to tell you something, you may not be ready. You may not be ready. And then again, you might be. It doesn't matter. Either way, it's going to be there and it's going to be awesome. And also make sure you check out my blog, Love Minus Religion, on Patheos.com. New blog will drop tomorrow. And I'm going to get into a regular cadence. I'm going to try to get these out on Tuesday and Thursday, but I can't promise anything because work is crazy. A lot of stuff going on there. And I think that's pretty much it. Well, also social media. You can catch me on Facebook.com at Derek Day Multimedia, or you can also catch me on Instagram or Twitter. My handle is Derek E. Day, DerrickEday, and also on YouTube, hundreds of videos where you can see the progression of my spiritual journey over the last 10 years. Yeah, I've been on YouTube for 10 years. I've been blogging for 10 years. Man, I've been doing this whole social media thing for 10 years. So there, I have an audit trail. And you can see what my trajectory looks like. And maybe it mirrors yours, and maybe it doesn't. In either case, it's there. So until the next time, be sure to check out all of the 3 Chord Live people that I mentioned at the beginning. Be sure to check out the Heretic Happy Hour. Check out all of this stuff, because this is all good stuff. You don't want to miss any of this stuff. I mean, this is like just really, really, really good stuff. So with that being said, I want to let you know that I love you. Namaste. I see the light in you. Namaste. I see the God in you. So, till next time, peace and hair.